Have you ever made a commitment to someone, or maybe even worse, to yourself, and for whatever reason, whatever justification, rationalization, you didn't keep that commitment? I know I have. I know that less than 1 in 5 people who sign up for a gym membership are still attending 6 months later. I'm sure that their intention was to join the gym and continue and start to live a healthier way of life, if nothing else. And for whatever rationalization they gave themselves, they're no longer going. I mean, we've all made commitments to ourselves that for whatever reason, at the time, we gave it with all of our heart and knew it was in our best interest. But for some reason, we were able to rationalize not doing it. I want you to break that word down. Rational lies. This is really when we fool ourselves with some type of logic or justification or excuse. Once I heard that the best excuse is no excuse. Now, of course, it's hard to live a life in that type of purity. And this isn't really what I want to talk about as much as I want to talk about integrity. There's a beautiful definition of integrity that my children brought home from school one day that said, integrity is what you do when no one's looking. And it made me think about how this idea of there's this multiple-eyed or multiple aspect self of ourselves that really we are not one congruent I. In fact, the Buddhists have a theory that we're this splintered amount of eyes, that we don't have this one congruent I that says, I do this, and I do this, and I do this. We have all these little mini I's that run around, and we're oblivious to it without self-observation, without some type of transcendence of ourselves to be able to see who we are. Of course, this requires a lot of honesty, and it can be painful because sometimes we don't want to see who we are. So when we think about it, it's doing the right thing when no one's looking. Well, of course, the right thing is going to be different for different people. And I'm not talking about moral relativism. What I'm saying is that morality is one of these things that comes from your upbringing, from your belief system, from your culture. It's such a complicated subject that there's been years and years of time dedicated to the philosophy of morality. But each one of us has a moral prescription that we have for ourselves. And when we do the right thing when no one's looking, I mean, it's sort of obvious, or it is this idea that when people are looking, we, of course, want to appear and show that we're good people. A lot of times this is the sort of the core of virtue signaling that we see so often in our society, where people will take up a cause because they feel this is what they're supposed to do when other people are looking. But a lot of these people, when no one's looking, or where no one can see inside their mind, they may have different feelings or act and behave in different ways, given the situation, given who's in the room with them, given with what they're doing. It might even be some type of, let's say, monetary situation that makes people behave differently. Obviously, if I don't have very much money, if I'm so broke I can't eat, I'm going to rationalize and justify why stealing some food is okay, particularly if I'm stealing food for someone I love. But nonetheless, it is rationalization. And these different I's in ourselves, they can rationalize in their own way. And, oftentimes you've heard in other videos where I've given the example that tonight I set the alarm and I'm going to wake up early and I'm going to go run. I'm going to run a couple miles. And when I wake up in the morning, it's a different I that wakes to the alarm. And of course, it's easier for me to rationalize why I can't go run. It might be the weather. It might be that there's something I need to do. Whatever the case may be, there's an incongruency between the I that went to bed last night and set the alarm and the I that woke up in the morning and rationalized away what I committed to the day before. So, coming back to this word integrity and bringing into this idea that we have these multiple sides of ourselves, these multiple I's. I like to think about integrity being how the I's are all aligned. They're all, let's say, committed or devoted or in line with each other. They have the same goals, the same self-love, the same aspect that makes integrity possible. Because it's these multiple I's, and when they're not aligned, when they're out of alignment, that makes it so easy to rationalize and justify our behavior. So what I want to do, I can't really emphasize how powerful this idea of the incongruent self, the incongruent I, has been in my development, because it's allowed me to take a look at myself not as one whole, but as parts of my character, parts of myself, and sort of dissect that part and look at it in a way that helps me move past it or helps me mature it. And I know I've talked about this in other videos, and I'm going to talk about it in more videos because it's so powerful. But what I want to share today is some of the techniques I've used to help myself, let's say, recognize these different I's. And the one that is probably the most significant, and the one that I teach all my students when I first start working with them, is what I call cues. Sort of like alarm bells, or ways that we can set ourselves up so that we can have a moment where we check in with ourselves and see what's happening from maybe a third place of observation. The first cue I'd like to talk about is what I call hands to face, or hands to head. And you may not be aware of how often your hand goes to your face, or how often your hand goes to your head. And the idea is that anytime I catch myself with my hand to my face or my hand to my head, I stop and I evaluate what's going on in that moment. So I take a look, I stop, I say, okay, what am I thinking about? What am I feeling? Where's the feeling in my body? What's going on in my environment? Who am I with? I don't make any judgments. I just want to take inventory of the moment so I can start to become aware of the different moments that these different I's may come out. Hands to face is very powerful because hands to face oftentimes is a comforting type of thing that we do for ourselves. And so oftentimes when we have our hands to our face, we're trying to comfort ourselves through some type of moment of tension or conflict. Another good cue. Now, mind you, I only choose one cue every 2 weeks. So at first when I choose a cue, and let's say it's hands to face, I may go the first 2 or 3 days and never catch my hand to face, because this is how preoccupied I am in the moment, how let's say self-identified I am with that particular I, or so caught in, let's say, the emotionalness of some type of conflict that I can't really catch myself with hand to face. And at the end of the day, as I sort of think about my day and I think about, okay, when did you have your hand to the face? And I realize, oh, I never caught myself. I obviously know that I've fooled myself. And so I become a little more aware each day until I start catching myself. And then after a couple weeks, what will happen is as my hand starts to approach my face, I'm catching it. I'm recognizing it. And that's when I'll swap the cue. Another good cue is crossed arms or crossed legs. Again, this is a form of self-comfort. So if I have crossed arms or I have crossed legs, there's a good chance that I'm preoccupied or self-identified in one of my I's. So it's a good opportunity for me to be able to, again, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? And what's going on around the environment? Another cue, or a different type of cue for me, is if I'm right-handed, I tend to turn on the water with my right hand. And so I'll try to, say, okay, I'm going to start turning on the water with the left hand. And there's a good chance I was probably alone when I was doing this. So this is a good time to sort of catch myself in my thoughts, catch myself in my feelings, and see what am I thinking or feeling at that moment. Walking through doorways. This is actually a big one in psychological shift of eyes. Have you ever gotten up from one room to go to another room to get something, and then when you get into that room, you're like, oh, what did I come in here for? There was a shift of eye. And so I will use this moment of walking through a doorway to take a look at what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, where I'm feeling it in my body, and what's going on around me. And I'm sure there's lots more cues that you can create for yourself that create this sort of pattern interrupt. This is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to interrupt ourselves, interrupt the sort of subconscious or unconscious flow of our day when we're preoccupied in thought, when we're self-stroking ourselves. Because with this awareness, when we start to exercise these cues, what we're doing is we're sort of building a muscle, a mental muscle, to be able to take a self-inventory and evaluate ourselves. And having done this now for 37, 40 years, a long time, I'm now able to do it in the middle of conflict. As soon as, let's say, a conflict starts and in a heated exchange with someone, I'm able to sort of take a break. They don't know it, but in my mind, I'm thinking, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Where is it in my body? And what's going on here? And this allows me to reset what I'm going through in that particular moment, rather than becoming over-identified so much and so self-righteous that I ruin relationships or create scenarios for myself that are more troublesome. In fact, sometimes I'm in conflict with someone and I personally have no conflict going on. I just witness their conflict and I see their tension, and I'm able to choose to either de-escalate it, keep it the same, or sometimes it's appropriate to escalate those emotional responses on their side so that we can get to a resolve that makes sense. So this week it was important for me because we're going to build on this some more. I truly want you to understand this idea of incongruent eyes, and how we can take a look or start to observe them so we can see ourselves in a way that's non-judgmental, so that we can start to observe ourselves in moments of conflict, in moments when we really need to sort of take some type of self-inventory, because it's going to lead us to the best outcome possible, rather than a reactive outcome that we may regret later. And again, if we were truly as aware as we think, we wouldn't need to do this. But we become over-identified. We become over-identified with a role we're playing. I might think as a father, I'm supposed to behave a particular way, and I'm not even aware of I'm supposed to behave in a particular way. I'm just behaving that way, whether it's appropriate or not. As a husband, I might do this. As a friend, as a coworker, as a leader, as a subordinate. All of these are roles that we play. They're not who we are. Who we are is a 10. We're perfect. You're perfect. I'm perfect. But the roles that we play, sometimes we're not so perfect at. And this is what the idea of becoming aware of ourselves helps us create this integrity among the different eyes, so that when we make a commitment to ourselves or other people, we're much more likely to follow through and not rationalize. Again, rational lies. We're not going to lie to ourselves as to why we don't need to keep the commitment we made. Remember, we're all stuck in the matrix. It's your job to find your way out. I hope what we share helps.